Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Common Threads podcast. Today we have five bright, young, passionate youth with us today.
So passionate.
We are gathered to discuss some of the hottest political topics in Canada and to try to find some common ground and to unite. So we're just gonna start off with a little icebreaker. Just tell me your name, how old you are, and what political party you affiliate yourself with.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Judah. I am 17 years old, and I'm here representing the Ontario Libertarian Party.
I'm Leo. I'm 16 years old. I was going to say grade 11, 16, same thing. And I'm representing the Ontario Young Liberal Party, not youth.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm in grade 11. Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm in grade 11, and I'm here from the Ontario Young Liberals.
My name is Vincent. I'm in grade 11, and my opinions lean towards the Conservatives.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and I'm here from the Ontario New Democratic Party.
Already sounds good. So maybe because people are curious, how do you kind of first get involved in politics, and what issue are you very passionate about?
So I first got involved in politics just by when I was, maybe 11, 12. I liked watching polls on TV. I found it interesting. And then I kind of delved into the topics that I was passionate about. And those topics are freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and I would say freedom of choice and probably freedom from government.
That sounds good. All right. Leo?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't really know where I got involved, how I got involved. I just kind of did. It was kind of like a rolling ball where I started to do one thing and then another thing, but
Get sucked in.
You kind of get sucked in, yeah. And I don't know, I just find myself aligning with the Liberal Party a lot. I try to get as many youth as I can involved in politics. Try to make sure that they know what kind of issues affect them, what kind of stuff they can be involved in, what change they can make in their government, which I think is really important. That's pretty much me.
Okay, moving on to me, I guess. I think for me, I've always been really interested in the way things work in our society, our social, legal institutions, etc. But I was never really interested in partisan politics. But it was really the 2021 snap election that ended up changing that, when being surrounded by everything 24/7 on the news became to realize, wait, I don't know as much about this as I'd like to. So from there, I started researching. I read the memoirs, I read the books, I researched online, I looked at the different parties, and eventually I found that, the Liberal parties represent my values best. And I got involved in the provincial campaign a few months later from there. So I think two issues that I care about the most and what kind of led me to make that jump was, number one, the healthcare system. Being personally impacted with my family really drew me to get more engaged in politics, but also youth apathy, trying to figure out what's the most effective way of engaging young people on the ground, of getting them into political discussions. So that was really what it was for me.
Alrighty, Vincent.
I got involved in politics in Ontario from the 2022 Model Parliament program. He was the deputy premier. And after that, I became the director of membership at the Canadian Conservative Youth Association. Some of the issues that I'm passionate about is economic freedom. I think that everyone deserves freedom in their own finances, regardless of how much income they earn, as well as youth involvement in politics. The youth in this generation, in our generation, I think should be a bit more concerned about some of the political issues that we're facing right now.
Yeah, all right, sounds good. Matthew?
Yeah, so in the 2015 election, I was very drawn to politics because I saw the speeches, the debates, the election night, the seats coming in on election night, and I found it to be very cool. Over the next few years, it wasn't very interesting, but in 2021, during COVID, when I saw the impacts on our education system, that really drew me into provincial politics. And I got involved with a very cool NDP who's now on to great things. But the 2021 election was called, did a bunch of volunteer work for the party, And I did also a bunch of work for the party provincially, and a lot of things have happened within the NDP in the last few years, and I think it's pretty cool to have been a part of it, to watch it all. Oh, sorry. Two things. Sorry, I forgot to mention 2 things I care about are education and the environment.
All right. So just to kick things off further, how about we talk about one positive takeaway you could talk about for the other parties in this room that are not yours. So I'll start with Judah.
Okay, I'll start off with the Liberal Party. I think they do a very good job at getting their youth involved. As being friends with Daniel and knowing that he's part of that organization, I see that they do a lot of really good work there to get them involved and get their voices heard. So I think that's good for them. For the Conservative parties, I think that they have a good basis to go off of. I think as a Libertarian, I somewhat agree with a lot of their values. So I think they're on to good things as long as they, keep their real values aligned. So I think they have a good basis to go off. And NDP, I think NDP does a good job at, getting themselves heard and getting themselves out there, Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a being involved in the Libertarian Party, I know it's a struggle to be a smaller party and to build yourself up. So as the NDP is not a small party, obviously, but they're smaller than the Liberal and Conservative. So I think they do a good job of building themselves up and getting their name out there. So I think that's something they do really well.
Alrighty, Leo.
If you guys want to go, like kind of switching it up.
Sure.
Sure. I think starting off with the Libertarian Party, I think one thing that stands about them is that at the end of the day, they're a group of people that are politically motivated. And that's still very rare in a society where we see so much apathy. So being involved at all, even in the case of a smaller party, is still something that's exceptional in many capacities. I think moving on to the Conservative Party, I think that their comms particularly does have a lot of merit to it. Being able to convey things with a degree of simplicity, it's always effective.
Like them apples?
Stop. That's enough. Just inflation was creative. I'm not going to lie to you. I won't lie. So yeah, I think that their calm stands out to me particularly. Mm-hmm. I think moving on to the NDP, their ability to engage with grassroots is something that also stands out particularly. Sometimes for better or worse at the end of the day, as we see sometimes often. But that's what I see the most when it comes to the NDP as positive.
Yeah. And I completely agree, especially with the Conservatives. A lot of, especially around the world, conservative parties, generally speaking, aren't very good at getting people involved. Because if you're a conservative, you're going to align with the Conservative Party. In Canada, you guys are very, very, very good at this is what we believe and this is why you should join us kind of thing.
Yeah, so I hear your points very well. I'd say another good thing about the Conservative Party is that they're very united, in provinces and on the federal level. They're more united than I'd say the left wing, like the Liberals and the NDP. Although I'd argue the Liberals aren't really left. But just had to throw that out there. Anyway, something that the Liberals do very well is that they're very good at flip-flopping. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, but they're good in subscribing to what the times call for, right? So one thing that
party.
Sorry?
We're a malleable party.
Yes, you are a malleable party. So I'd say one of the good things that they implemented while they were in office, and you can argue that this was driven by the NDP, but was a national strategy for dental care for children who are under 12 years old, which we would not have seen from a conservative government.
Yeah, it's true.
It's important to say that. So and finally about the Libertarian Party, again, Stacey, you mentioned this. It's a group of people who are very, very committed to their ideology. And they don't let the prospects of governing sway them away from their ideology.
Especially that you're such a small party and becoming government is very difficult.
Yeah.
It's
which is something
seats is very difficult.
Something I say this because I see this in my own party, right? It's you get into government and sometimes you notice that some things aren't really doable, even though you can argue they are, but you need to be kind of pragmatic.
Ready, Vincent.
Yes. So starting with the Libertarian Party, I think that the conservatives and libertarians have a lot of common ground in terms of values and the issues that they care about. I think there's a lot of alignment in there. The liberals have done a really phenomenal job at bringing youth into politics, whether it's like membership fee or just in terms of their policies, how the way that they draw young people in.
Yeah.
I think is something that all parties can learn from. The NDPs, they're smaller than the liberals and the conservatives, but I think that overall they do a good job at telling everybody else what they believe in, standing on their principles, but also keeping themselves as a firm opposition party in whether it's the House of Commons or provincial legislatures.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think that pretty much everything that everyone said, I kind of agree with to a pretty high extent. Like, especially with conservatives, like you guys are across the board. Like the Liberal Party, we have a lot of like factions within our own party.
That's true.
So you're able to take liberals that believe radically different things, but at the end of the day, we're all liberals. The Conservative Party, you guys have like, if you take a conservative from Nova Scotia and one from BC and one from none of it, you're all going to have the same kind of ideology, which is a very, very difficult thing to maintain. And it's especially more impressive when you see how relevant you are in federal politics.
Yeah, alrighty. So today, I guess the end goal for today's episode is to create some sort of united policy. So I really want to start the conversation about, I guess, some of the most pressing issues you think that are affecting Canadians directly, and things that you guys think should be, we should actually start more like caring about. People who are listening to this podcast, maybe they don't know about something about a policy, or they don't know about a certain issue. So maybe we could talk about, I guess, the things that you would like to see happen and what you would like to bring to today's conversation. So anyone wants to start off?
So is this like something that we kind of all agree on?
No, but I guess the issues you think, the most pressing issues in Canada right now.
Got it.
Fair enough. I think starting off, it really does come down to those obvious things you'll see on every single platform. But including provincial here, healthcare, even across the country, is a very important issue to discuss right now, especially here in Ontario. But moving on from there, obviously affordability, especially when it comes to housing, and of course, the environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I shadow everything that you said. The environment, I think that kind of everyone unilaterally, this is something that I really like about Canada. Everyone is able to acknowledge that the environment is a problem right now, regardless of where you stand politically.
Yeah. I think it's also fair to say, just adding on to that with a lot of the other issues that we're seeing in Canada right now, especially when it comes, like I said, to affordability and the housing crisis, when it comes to cost of living, that we're seeing a discussion on environmental issues like climate change start to wither away a little bit in favor of a lot of the more economic issues. So obviously, especially as youth, when we see activist movements, they care about more about the environment and climate change, I think, a lot more than any of the other demographics, speaking generally. That's fair to say. But I think it is important to continue keeping discussion on the environment and climate change in spite of that. So in some capacity, we do have a responsibility as youth to continue doing that. But
that's also because like it matters to us a lot. Like
exactly.
If you're like 80 years old, right? And your environment in 100 years is going to fail, doesn't affect you because you're dead in 20. But to us, we're going to be alive when it starts to become a big problem.
Exactly.
It's already a big. What I mean,
True.
like you know what I mean. So when it inevitably becomes something that we have to deal with pressing, like it's really, really good that youth are able to kind of unilaterally mobilize.
Yeah, but you also can't have a good economy without a good environment. That's absolutely a fact. When we're seeing things like the increase of climate refugees internationally is an example of how are we as a country going to end up dealing with that. But on top of other things like natural disasters and dealing with the economic consequences of it, decreased soil fertility off the top of my head, and freshwater sources, just a few niche environmental issues that are going to have economic consequences as well. But
it's not just that too. I mean, I think back to, I talked about debates in the intro. And Elizabeth May said something in the 2019 debate saying that the climate the climate crisis is the biggest economic opportunity in a generation.
Yeah.
She said something along those lines. And, renewables are such an excellent way of boosting our local economy, making us a leader in this new and more important than ever industry. We can get new people, we can create new jobs, we can have an industry that's thriving in Canada. But we see the Conservative government in Alberta put a 6-month moratorium on renewable energies, right? So, I mean, of course, I echo what you said concerning that healthcare and affordability are the two biggest issues, and we certainly need to keep the focus on the climate crisis, because I think that the incoming Conservative government, which is very likely to win, and I know that's a reality a lot of us don't want to face, is hey, a few of us, okay, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I think that's something we need to be considering, is that you're not going to have a government that's open to a carbon tax. And even this government has not had the best climate record, because we're not even on track to get to our 2030 targets of carbon emissions.
I also think it really depends on what's like popular in society, like what we're focusing on, because at some points, like especially like leading up to an election, like the points that are most important get brought up, and some of them that are important will kind of just like get like thrown away. So I think
the carbon tax,
like the carbon tax or like the environment, like when there's a pressing issue, like the other issues get thrown out the door. Like no one really cares about them anymore until that issue is resolved, or even not resolved, or people don't care about that one anymore. So I think it really matters on what's happening in society with what like the most important issue. Like at times the economy is like not really talked about, and at times the environment is not really talked about. So it really depends on what's going on at what certain time, I feel.
That's true. I imagine, we have a very reactionary approach to dealing with problems, it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with Judah too. Like affordability is definitely like the focus of in politics in whatever province. Like whether it's Ontario or Alberta or whichever province, people are more concerned about affordability than pretty much anything else at this moment.
Yeah.
And that's why other issues kind of fade away a little bit. But obviously, like affordability, some of the biggest issues that we're facing right now is affordability. Housing is a big one. Everybody's talking about how Canada,
here in the GTA as well.
And also Canada in general.
Yeah.
How the housing is a few times more expensive than the US and other countries. But also obviously the environment. I think that our generation cares about the environment more than any other generation. And
we have to.
And that's a necessity.
And to add on to your point, I don't think caring about the environment and caring about housing and affordability are mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Because those two go hand in hand, I would say. Because one of the more recent examples of those two things going hand in hand is the Greenbelt scandal. And I'm just going to throw that wet fish on the table.
Yeah.
Okay? We have a government in this province that was so keen on benefiting their developer friends with the rhetoric that they want to build homes that would make people's lives more affordable. It would give them a place to live that they don't have to pay like an arm and a leg for, right?
Yeah.
That policy was all about the transaction of those lands. It was to enrich the developers. That would put our food security, it would put our flood protection, it would put biodiversity all at risk. But the government that we have right now is not aware of the fact that solving the housing affordability crisis and protecting the environment they're not aware of the fact that these things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They were willing to destroy parts of the Greenbelt to to score political points where and build those affordable homes or McMansions or whatever, but it would not have helped a single Ontarian other than the people who are
I think that it's
benefiting.
The most important thing, this is especially for me and Stacey, because Liberals right now are in federal government. The most important thing I think that people have to learn, especially adults, is that when your party is in government, the most important thing is to be able to recognize when you're wrong. And there are times when the Liberal government has been wrong, and that there are things that I do not agree with them, and that I think that should be changed. Policies that they have enacted or things that they have done that were not necessarily for the good of the country. But I think that especially now where unfortunately people are going to the defense of governments, I don't mean to target you, but like the ones, because it's more important to us, like the one in Ontario. I think that it's very, very important that we're able to kind of see this is not a good idea, but instead of seeing it's not a good idea, so then vote for this guy instead, it's not a good idea. How can we fix it with what we have right now?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And obviously there were potential errors in the plans with the Green Belt, and that is why Doug Ford apologized. But I think it's also the housing crisis is real, and we need imminent solutions to solve the problem.
I agree with what you said, but the Green Belt, the government walked into the Green Belt deal knowing that the response was not going to be positive. Yep. And so the public knew about this in November of 2022. So about a year ago today. But this was in the works for years and years before. Okay? So the time the government spent fighting, public backlash and constant questioning at Queen's Park, and an AG report and an integrity commissioner's report, that is time that the government could have been spending, developing housing solutions that would actually bring people homes. So that wasted a whole year, and housing prices got even worse. You have grocery companies that are, price gouging. That wasted a whole year of precious time that's catching up to us.
Yeah. And even on to the, sorry to interrupt, but at the end of the day, it really is just about ethics and transparency and how we value that in government. And this comes across, this is necessary for all parties. But I think especially in the Greenbelt scandal, as we're seeing now, how important that is, but especially as you talk about the lost time that could have been put into actually developing policies, that could be actually put into helping Ontarians. That's what's important in this instance.
Right. So for our listeners that do not know about the Greenbelt scandal, could one of you kind of explain what it is?
You're a little bit more politicized than anyone else, to be honest.
I can do it objectively, but if you really want to.
Objectively, what happened in the Greenbelt scandal? Which camera do I look at? Okay, so what happened in the Greenbelt scandal, in the most objective way I can think of, there's a chunk of Ontario land called the Greenbelt, which is protected land, which means that it cannot be developed to build houses because it's biodiverse. You need it for farmland, you need it for floodland. And what happened is that the Ontario provincial government let out chunks of that land to be developed. The problem is
by those developers.
The problem is that there are developers that have connections to the Ontario government, to the Ontario Premier, which had already been established that they were going to buy that land and that they would develop it at their own prices, how they would like, which is difficult because
it was cheap land that was not able to be developed. They bought it and then they opened it up, and that the value skyrocketed.
Exactly. And so what that basically means is, let's say I'm the premier and I have some friends that want to develop land, that they want to make money. This is land that I have power to unleash. I'll unleash it. I'll give it straight to you, and then you can do with it what you like. And then at the end of the day, the goal with that was to make money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that as much as discussing this, things like the Greenbelt and things are important. But I really want our conversation to kind of flow in a way where it kind of applies to all Canadians. So let's talk about more federal issues. I think you guys were touching on the environment, renewable energy, affordability. But maybe a question I would ask all of you is, what's more important? Is the environment more important? Is the housing crisis more important to address? Like, what is more important? How do you determine that? And what could we kind of all agree on?
Well, I think that, as we've kind of discussed, the environment and the economy can go hand in hand. That is a fact. We can agree on that. But I think it's very obvious as well that with current housing prices, particularly when we're looking at affordability, that right now, from the perspective of the average Canadian, and from governments as well, that housing is something that really does need to be tackled immediately. And we need to do that in a way that doesn't just cast aside our problems when it comes to the climate crisis, as well as coming to the environment generally, and not just the very broad abstractions when you talk about the climate crisis and our goals in 2050, etc. So yes, they need to go hand in hand, but from an immediate perspective, it's clear that we need to deal with the housing crisis, considering the effects that we're seeing right now.
So so Stacey's, I guess, vote is housing crisis most pressing issue. Is that kind of the opinion? Because we're trying to get a united.
Whoa! We're
issue.
asking for unity, and then you want me to be like black and white here? Come on.
Not black and white necessarily, but just if you to pick one, like a policy, you like all parties to say, okay,
immediately right now, housing.
Okay, all right, maybe Judah.
Yeah, I think there's no time like the present. I mean, it's kind of obvious what we need right now. I feel like every Canadian citizen would be kind of mad if they're like, okay, we're not doing anything about the housing crisis right now. We're just going to focus on 50 years down the line. I think that's kind of stupid to think about. Obviously, we need to think about the environment and what's going on down the line, and our future kids and what they're going to deal with. But like, we have a really big problem going on right now, and we need to act on it, or it's just going to get worse, and it's going to be mayhem. It already is, and it's just going to get worse. So we need to deal with the housing crisis now.
Okay, Vincent.
Obviously, I think that all of the three issues mentioned are very important. But I think that the most pressing ones are housing and affordability. And I think that they go hand in hand.
Okay.
They're all about people's finances, particularly with the affordability issue. This is also in the context of federal politics very much related to the environment issue.
Okay.
And that's obviously related to the carbon tax. So in my own opinion, I don't believe that carbon tax is the most optimal solution for people right now at this moment, considering how high the inflation is, and how just in general how high the prices of goods are across. I wouldn't use that term, but I certainly think that that's a more pressing issue for Canadians than the environment.
Yeah.
So I just want to add on to that. So we see certainly with the housing crisis, like the attitude of the current Liberal government is very telling of the importance of the matter right now, because right now they're taking action on housing in a way that I haven't seen in the last 10 years, like that they were in government. They've been governed 8 years now, right? 7, something like that.
But I do think that, and I say this as a Liberal, it took too long.
It took way too long. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that now they're realizing, oh, this is the issue that people care a lot about. Mm-hmm. And also it also shows that conservative messaging has been very effective, because the carbon tax, I would argue, has not been instrumental in raising prices to the degree to which they've been raised. But because conservatives have been so successful in their messaging, saying, oh, the carbon tax is one of the factors causing your increase in prices, that's forcing the Liberals to back down a little bit. But we talk about things like just inflation when it comes to grocery prices. And I would counter it with something that, I don't know, let's call it West inflation, right? You have companies like Loblaws and like Metro and
for all those who don't know, what do you mean by West inflation?
Okay, so Weston is the family that owns Loblaws, right? Yeah. You have these quasi-monopolies that have a chokehold on all grocery in Canada.
Mhm.
And they have been caught in 4K, if I can say that, in gouging their prices. The federal government, their strategy for lowering those costs is politely asking, hey, Loblaws, hey, Metro, hey, Sobeys, lower your prices, please. And that's not enough.
I think in general, just adding on a little bit, Canada does have a general problem with monopolies.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah,
We
that's true,
see
yeah.
more-
Like with cell phone
Rogers and
companies.
Shaw.
Yeah,
exactly,
that's what I was
exactly.
gonna
So
say.
there needs to be more effective antitrust laws in Canada, and pushing on that issue.
I
But
think that the weird part is that there's not like a single person in Canada who looks at Loblaws as a corporation or Rogers or Bell as a corporation
They're
and
just
says
there.
like, yeah, that whatever that they're doing
Mm.
is going to be good for me as a person, right?
there you go.
And
And the weird thing is that the government has yet to be able to reflect that and like see, you know what, maybe Canadians don't want Loblaws to have so much power. Maybe they don't want Metro to have so much power. So
it's not that I don't think that's the issue, because for example they recently allowed they allowed Rogers and Shaw to merge. Okay,
Mhm.
That's one example. You cannot have a strong monopoly policy, an anti-monopoly policy, when the monopolies are funding your campaigns.
Yeah.
You can't. Okay, because if all of these companies are going to lobby the government and make donations during campaigns in order to get favorable treatment from the government's not going to tell them, hey, Rogers, hey, Shaw, you can't merge because that's bad for consumers.
But it's also tough because like, you know, the guys who are going to be getting this money are politicians, and politicians are the one that would make the rules to change that. So it's not going to happen anytime soon. We need something that's more, I guess you could say, tangible, something that can actually happen, that people can actually do.
Hey, one of the things that I want to give the federal Liberals credit for is self-service on the subway. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna say this, like it was the federal government that forced Rogers to allow the other companies to access their infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of public pressure that made them do that.
Yeah. Okay, so I think a common denominator that I'm seeing right now is we truly think that affordability is a really pressing issue.
Oh, yeah.
And the current, well, at least according to my knowledge, what the federal government is doing is giving incentives to municipalities to build more homes.
Yeah.
And do we think that that solution is a efficient and effective way to address this system, or what do you guys think should be done?
I think it's very difficult in that at the end of the day, if you have more homes, more people will get to live in them, which means that people like the housing problem at the end of the day isn't that housing is expensive. If everyone has the money to buy the houses, it doesn't matter if they're expensive. It's the fact that houses are so expensive that people aren't able to have a home, a place to live, right? That's the fundamental issue. And if we're able to get people in houses across Ontario, that means that they'll be able to work, which means that they'll be able to study. That means that they'll be able to produce in the economy. And if they're able to produce in the economy, it's a positive loop. You know, you'll develop more houses, and which means that more people can live, more people can impact the economy.
Mhm.
And the federal government finally is doing something about that. And I think that giving these incentives to the municipalities is a really, really good way. At the end of the day, it's a really, really good way for you to be able to get municipalities to say, hey, you know, Ajax needs more homes, or Oshawa needs more homes, or whatever other municipality needs more homes. And then when they're able to build that, more people will live, more people will have homes.
I want to emphasize when you say across Ontario, like one of the reasons, like we're like, look at Toronto, like there's nothing. First of all, homes are so available, and there's nothing available as well. I think that as Ontarians and as Canadians, and people who are coming to the province, like newcomers, need to kind of disperse. I feel like we're all like when people come to Toronto. I mean, when people come to Ontario, a lot of them, they'll go to the big city. A problem that we're having is no one is going to these smaller towns, these smaller areas that are like, to be honest, they're good. Like they have there's stuff there. There's good education. There's more affordable housing than what we have here in Toronto. And there's a life to be lived there that people aren't living. And and too many people are coming to the big city and kind of like making it seem like this is the only option we have here.
Yeah.
I think we really need to like make an emphasizing on this person. I'm not saying everyone should just like, I'm living in Toronto, I'm going to just move to like the middle of nowhere. I think it needs to be strategically done in a way that we disperse. And I think that will not only help our economy, but it'll help the housing, will help so many things, food prices. That I think that's something that can really be done to help in all aspects.
So at the end of the day, it's also about economic opportunity. So like you just said, if people are moving to cities like Toronto, where housing is very expensive and accommodation, finding a place to live is so expensive, because in the rural areas, there's not as much opportunity there just by comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think back to the topic talking about municipal investment specifically, the fact is that municipalities do have an often, I think, undervalued role in the housing crisis and developing policies,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to zoning.
Yeah.
So obviously this part of, providing incentives for, municipal governments to actually take on the housing crisis, it's one part of it. But I also think it's not the only one. So when we talk about the housing crisis, every single person has been saying this. You need all levels of government on board. You need support from the federal government, you need support from the provincial government, and you need support from municipalities.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, the issue is so complex, but because of this collaboration, I think that's what makes it so difficult as well.
Yeah. And to add on to that, what you said about all levels of government collaborating, and you made a very good point that municipalities have such an important role to play. Municipalities in Ontario, they know how to manage themselves. They know where to build. They know what's feasible for people. They know where people can access their jobs and necessities, right? And we have, and I'm just gonna say this again, right? You have a provincial government in Ontario that disrespects municipalities because they impose their own zoning. Okay, like recently the Ford government got caught, expanding the urban boundaries for York region, for Durham region. There were like 5 or 6 regions across the province where urban boundaries and were expanded, but density targets were lowered, and density is what we need right now. I think also to what Premier Eby in British Columbia is doing, where he put restrictions on Airbnbs, but also ended exclusionary zoning, which is basically only allocating space for single-family homes. He ended exclusionary zoning in every municipality that has over 5,000 people. And that is the kind of aggressive policy and level of cooperation that we need from our provincial government. So
just to clarify for anyone, exclusionary zoning is if I have like a chunk of land and I'm the government and I say only like big houses that will house one family or 2 families are allowed to be built here. And the tough part about that is that you build all these houses, but if a student isn't going to live in a single family house, a student's going to live in an apartment or this or that or whatever.
Exactly.
So it's difficult because
it's what Stacey, you said, we need cooperation from all 3 levels of government. We need to respect municipalities. Yep. We need a provincial partner that will be aggressive on policies that are not going to make it more difficult to achieve density targets. And we need a federal government that is willing to step up. And I think that right now the Liberals federally are willing to step up. There are some, I'm not going to say that there aren't issues with municipalities, and Toronto is a major example of that. But municipalities need to be respected. And in Ontario, the provincial government is attempting to circumvent the role that municipalities play. And that is wrong.
Vincent, do you have...
On the housing issue, I think in Canada, housing issue is more of a supply issue. So if you look at like how much housing Canada has compared to the land mass.
Well, I think it's also that real estate has basically been financialized in Canada. That rather than just treating it as a place to live, it's also been treated as a commodity, like something, and your investment, basically.
The economy is real estate oriented.
Exactly.
Like, now, think about it. Ever since the financial crisis, interest rates have been so low, and now the real estate market is locked because all the people who can, it's like, think of it as an exclusive club. The people who own homes, they have the money to trade homes with others, but you have this entire demographic, which includes us, that is locked out of the housing market.
Yeah,
I think that's an issue of other countries as well, but just for Canada specifically, I think that it is a bit surprising to people when people know that Canada has a lot of land, but there is not much housing.
But the tough part is also like, for example, if you take a city or if you take a territory like Yukon, right? The reason why Yukon was developed was because there was a big gold rush in the late 1800s. So a lot of people went there, and naturally cities were established. If you tried right now, like as Canada, as a country, to establish a city where Dawson City is, or where basically any city in the north, it'd be very difficult, because for about half of the year you're not able to get materials there. You're not able to get lumber or wood, and so you're not able to produce as much as you can. So like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, or the biggest cities in Canada, are all comparatively to the south, because it's very cold and it's very difficult to get to places in Canada. So
and it's close to America.
So it's tough, because like, as much as I understand your point where we have lots of land but we have little houses, or we have little cities, even if we were to develop these cities in the middle of nowhere in Canada, and let's be honest, 90% of Canada is middle of nowhere, even if we were to establish these cities, not many people would go, because I would much rather, like me, or probably most people in Canada would much rather stay in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver than they would go to ABC city in the middle of Alberta.
Okay, so for the sake of time, we're going to get on to proposing our united bill of sorts. So let's just first decide on, because we know the problem, right? We're going to talk about the housing crisis. And what is the bill going to be called?
Well, what's our solution?
Yeah.
Title.
We get to the solution.
Okay, guys, we could go into the core of it right away.
What do you guys?
So let's just, well,
oh God.
kind of.
What do you guys think? What is housing? The problem is that there are not enough houses in places where people want to live. How can we change that?
Right. Okay. So as according to bill making procedures, we start with whereas Canadians. So
let's skip the format. Let's skip the format. Let's get straight to trying to come up with a solution.
Okay.
Everything else
For
later.
model parliament, you don't get to choose your topic. They give you your bill topic.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
How about this?
But yeah, let's
guys.
How about this? And just an idea. Let's see what people think.
Okay.
A lot of the reason, if we take like a random city in the middle of nowhere that we were to build, right, and there's housing, whatever, people wouldn't go there because they have no reason to go there. They would much rather stay in Toronto, where they know that they have businesses and cafes and restaurants to go to. What if where we can film podcasts? What if we were to establish, I don't know, a university, and then federal government would have given it a bunch of funding and make it a great science university in the middle of nowhere? People would be like, oh, maybe I should go to that university, or maybe, make a big business and then get people to go over there, just as a way of incentivizing people to go and disperse.
I'm not sure necessarily about just placing a university in the middle of nowhere isn't just going to automatically create
in the middle of nowhere.
Economic opportunity there.
It's Sudbury, but it's not.
But people, people would not go out of their way to they wouldn't say, oh, I really, really want to go to Laurentian University, because they would much rather go to U of T or McGill or Queen's. So what if we make Laurentian an amazing university in mining engineering, and then, which is pertinent in Sudbury, and get people to say, I want to become a mining engineer. Let's go to Sudbury.
But is that something people necessarily want to study? It's not super popular, I think.
I think he's just kind of giving an example. I don't think he's being so literal in it, but I do agree with what he's saying. I mean, look at the United States, for example. Obviously, their population is so much more than us. Obviously, it's like Canada, but it's different. There's towns and cities.
That was a terribly anti-nationalist view of our country.
I mean, I guess, but look at the U.S. There's towns and cities that are based around universities. Many universities are based around. I mean, many places are based around a university. That's the culture. Something like that can happen here, and that can be the starting point of what we're trying to argue. We want people in going to these more rural places, and once these get built up, they're not going to be considered rural anymore. They're going to be considered places that people want to live in. That's
similar to Kingston, right?
Exactly.
That's a great example. Like Kingston, what was Kingston before? They had a jail. It was nothing there before. Kingston is you can argue it's a university town, and look at Kingston, it's growing. That we can do something like that in these more rural places, and that will greatly help all these issues that we're talking about, especially the housing and affordability crisis that we're having.
Just putting this down here, I think you do need financial incentives to get people to move in a certain direction.
Obviously.
But even if it's like, for example, let's say I'm a university student and I go to the middle of nowhere to study mining engineering. I'll study mining engineering, and the city, I'll have a university. It'll be a university town. After I'm done that, I'll have a good enough job where I can leave and come back to Ajax or Oshawa or nickel mining city ABC. So if I can incentivize people to go to somewhere where they're able to get developed, because let's be honest, if you're in Toronto, the problem with housing is because you don't have the money to buy that housing. And the vast majority of people who don't have that money are people like students. If you're able to get those students to somewhere else, make them study there, and then they come back, I think that a chunk of the housing problem would be diminished, would it not?
I think a part of it, that the result that you end up creating from that is a lack of economic diversity in those regions as well. And I don't know, when you talk about just placing university and focusing on education as a way to bring people to a region, which would then incentivize housing being more or less created by as a result of that automatically. But I think it's a jump, because when we're talking about the development of policy, I think there needs to be a little bit more. And I think there needs to be grander than focusing on this very niche aspect of just
universities.
Yeah, universities. Like you're
well, it's just an example. We could establish, I don't know, something that makes lumbar or whatever. What do you guys think? What do you think, Vincent?
Building universities in rather remote municipalities, I think it could be a plan that can work. If you look at the University of Waterloo, it's not very close to any sort of big city areas. Also, like the idea of making the university more focused on majors that are more relevant to the area, like mining, engineering. But as I said, I think that the housing issues is also a supply issue. If you look at, like, for example, you mentioned the United States. Like, the amount of people in the United States, it's a lot of times higher than the population in Canada. Yeah. And yet, I think that, like, if you're talking about the ratio of population to land mass, I think that Canada still is larger. That ratio for Canada is still larger.
Like, do you mean there's like
more land on capita for the number of people?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I think another layer of this problem is incentivizing municipalities to build more housing and to make housing permits faster. I think that's also a huge part of it. And as you guys all talked about, it's an issue that requires all levels of government to work together. Yeah. And that's certainly a challenge.
For sure.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add, so to kind of piggyback off of what Leo, Stacy, and Vincent said, I think also, like, when it comes to post-secondary and career paths, we can have policies like, okay, let's say, for example, if you want to come study medicine in Canada, you'll get cheaper tuition if you go to the University of Winnipeg, for example, and you'll get a much better pay if you decide to stay in Manitoba. Now, I don't know if this has been implemented somewhere before. I think maybe it might have been implemented in some of the prairie provinces, but we could certainly apply that to parts of Ontario and the rest of the country as well. Let's say you go to the university, like to Laurentian, right? I'm going to say that again. I don't know if they have like a medical school, but let's say they do. You go to Laurentian and your tuition's way cheaper, and you get, let's say you get incentives, whether it be monetary or other. You get incentives to stay there and practice medicine there and actually contribute to the community. So I think that's another route through which we can approach this as well.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I think I guess everything that we could all agree on is to build infrastructure such as universities, hospitals. I wish we could have more time to talk about healthcare, because that's another big issue. But maybe
it's another episode, guys.
It is another episode. So maybe we'll come back and discuss healthcare. But for the sake of time, I'm really glad that we could all, agree on we should build more infrastructure in these rural cities, like I don't know, Sudbury, right? So, or name 5 Ontarian rural towns. Go.
Napanee, Belleville,
Ottawa.
Alfred, Alfred, Temiskaming Shores, and Chatham Kent.
There you go. So those are the communities I feel like we should, we're gonna develop, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, Alfred has a university, and I forgot which university campus exactly is there, but they have one that's it's the University of Guelph. They have something. They have like programs that are specific to agriculture, and that is a big part of Alfred's local economy.
all right. So I guess to end it off, let's just say one, I guess, short phrase you would like to say to the current government of what they want to hear.
Which government?
The current government, like it could be any government, just people who I guess lead. What do you want to say to them? What should they know from the youth?
That's so vague.
I know it could be general, right? It could
Okay,
be
starting off, listen to youth voice. That's the number one thing.
okay.
Listen to the perspectives of young people. Often or not, they have pretty good ideas.
Like
so
we saw
take that into
today.
consideration.
There you go.
Don't tread on me.
Don't you?
Okay.
You want me to go first? For the Liberal government, just cut the tax. I mean, you've already done that pretty much for Atlantic Canada. I don't see a reason not to do it for other parts of Canada.
Yeah.
So cut the tax and let people put a bit more money into the pockets of people at this time, as it is very challenging for people. The inflation is very, very high.
Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that in 5 years, we're going to be voting for you. And by we, I mean youth. And right now, I don't think that there's a single person under the age of 18 who genuinely says, yeah, the government wants what's
Who is
best for me right now.
satisfied with whatever?
Sorry?
Who's satisfied with this?
Exactly.
status quo?
Who's satisfied with what the positions, the direction that you're going right now. So, in my opinion, make sure that you know that we're going to be voting for you and that we're going to choose whether or not you can continue.
Yeah, and just for me to finish, and I'll kind of go off of what you said. The government, and this can apply to any level of government, stop wasting time. Stop wasting time trying to fight scandals that you've created for yourself.
Yeah.
Stop wasting time on policies that you know are not going to work. Stop wasting time trying to impose your own solutions without recognizing that this is a multifaceted and multi-party effort. If I know that different parties and different governments have different people that need to be served. And the reasons could be, there are numerous reasons.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, it's in their interest to hasten the pace at which we're going right now.
Yeah.
In terms of housing, in terms of action to tackle the affordability crisis. Because, Leo, you said we're going to be voting for you. So, keep that in mind. Okay?
Make sure we like you.
Yeah. All right. I guess just to wrap up the episode, I think something I would say, just to chime in, is I think it's very crucial to identify something as a problem and to identify that it affects real people like you guys and like us. And I know it's very, very difficult to, not politicize a certain problem we have in our country, but just to really being compassionate, being empathetic, and to really navigate with the idea in mind that we are all humans after all, and we have to have these type of conversations to agree and to get things done. And I think that it can only be done if we stop just politicizing and if we stop arguing with each other. Right?
I think at the end of the day, we all need to come together. We're all Canadians at the end of the day.
Yep.
We're all one. We're not defined by our parties. We're all people who are together, who want the best for our country. I think I can say that. So I think we all need to come together today and remember that, we're all together. We make up the nation of Canada, and we need to if we want change for the better, which we all do, we need to, come together and help each other out.
Real.
Yep. All right. On that note, we will wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. Please stay tuned for next week. We have another very exciting episode. And I'd like to thank each one of the guests today. We had some wonderful points that a lot of people will definitely find very interesting. So, yeah, I will see you next week. Goodbye.